The desperate search for people buried in the rubble left by another bombing in Syria. Airstrikes by Russian and Syrian forces continued throughout the weekend. They're aiming for Al-Qaeda-linked militants. What they hit here was a busy market.
We were here when the missiles hit. We have nothing to do with this. We are all civilians here. My son was wounded. This is a civilian area. What can I do?
The smoke rises from another dropped bomb. And for another family, it's time to pack up and leave. Abu Osama is taking his family away from the violence.
We're fleeing again because of the heavy bombardment by the criminal Bashar al-Assad. Yesterday, more than 400 rockets hit this town.
And they set off. One more family with nowhere to go. Joining many, many more fleeing the renewed offensive. Turkey says 80,000 people are currently heading towards its border with Syria, and the situation is deteriorating.
If the violence towards the people of Idlib does not stop, this number will rise even more. In that case, Turkey will not carry such a migrant burden on its own. The negative impact of the pressure we will be subjected to will be something that all European nations, especially Greece, will also feel.
At the moment, there's no option for this new wave of displaced people, other than join 500,000 others who fled to the Turkish border this year already, in relative safety, but living in conditions the UN describes as horrific.
DW's Dorian Jones is covering this story from Istanbul and joins us now. Dorian, we hear that thousands of refugees are heading towards the Turkish border from Syria. What is likely to happen to them?
Well, that is a big question that humanitarian organizations are asking. There are already believed to be as many as 200,000 refugees close to the Turkish border. There is a large wall that is protecting the Turkish frontier, and Turkey does have security forces along that border, but they do also have the Turkish Red Crescent helping refugees in the Syrian side of that frontier. But the question is, if there is this another mass influx, and possibly even more as this offensive does pick up speed, the question is, will they try to cross over into Turkey and prompt another humanitarian crisis for Ankara, which has withstanding years of these crises and waves of refugees entering Turkey?
Well, the Turkish president says that his country cannot handle another wave of Syrian refugees, and he says this is going to have implications for Europe. What does this mean for Europe?
Well, that is another big question I think a lot of people in Brussels are wondering about. If you recall, back in 2015, over 1 million refugees, mainly Syrians, left Turkey into Greece, prompting a massive refugee crisis that had repercussions all over Europe. The fear is now that Erdogan will again make a similar move, and he's repeatedly said he cannot cope with any more. The presence of over 3.5 million refugees in Turkey is a source of growing public discontent, and it's also caused President Erdogan a series of electoral setbacks over anger over the ongoing presence of refugees. Erdogan's message is that Europe has to take responsibility. It's not only Turkey. He will be looking for support, possibly more financial support, but beyond that, he may be looking for assistance on sharing the burden of refugees, which up until now Europe has been extremely reluctant to do.
Okay, now this wave of refugees from Syria is being driven by the military offensive from the Syrian and Russian forces there. What are you hearing about the situation on the ground in Idlib?
Well, it is dire in the extreme, and this is an area that has been withstanding bombardments for the last few years. This is the last main enclave of the rebel opposition. Over 3 million refugees, Syrians are holed up in the enclave. Half of them are believed to be refugees, and a third are believed to be children. It is a major point of humanitarian concern across the region, and the fact that the Syrian regime, Damascus, has said they are determined to retake this enclave will be prompting that there will be another massive refugee crisis. Possibly more than 1 million refugees will seek to flee and seek refuge in Turkey, and this is why Turkey is determined to prevent this. There are Turkish officials believed to be having talks in Moscow to look to Moscow to rein in the Syrian regime, given the fact that it is Russian planes that are providing the main support for this current offensive.
Dorian, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. DW's Dorian Jones there in Istanbul.